Welcome to 101.1 FM WBRULP WFOOLP WVVXLP Providence. I'm your co-host Dhruv
And I'm your co-host Alejandro Jackson.
and this is the Outta Pocket Podcast,
where we pull conversation topics out of our pocket.
and occasionally go out of pocket.
So on today's show, we're going to talk about signed versus independent artists in the music industry and how they and their stories shape the industry itself.
Yeah, so I think it's no surprise to say that you and I both very much enjoy listening to music. Like it's a big part of our lives.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
I always see you with one AirPod in, rolling down the street, always listen to something.
Yeah.
And I myself, like we've both been playing instruments for a very long time. You play guitar, I play piano, and trombone. So it's like, music is sort of like one of those things that's very close to our hearts, and I feel like close to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Which is why the industry itself is a very big deal.
Mm-hmm. So I think in an age of social media, 'cause I guess kind of how we talked about in our last episode, it's very easy to put yourself out there on the internet now. I mean, you and I now have this podcast.
Yeah.
And that culminated in all of about a semester, right? So, as I was saying, it's very easy now to put yourself out there on the internet. And so I guess when it comes to music and the music industry, you really have to decide how you're going to go about that, right? So I guess first, I just wanted to talk about some of the pros and cons of being, a signed artist versus an independent artist in the music industry, and how sort of that, I guess, changes, how, I guess, a lot of, like, the music industry's culture for the most part. So I guess we should start with signed artists. I mean, I feel like it goes without saying, being a signed artist
Yeah,
is
and
very
real
beneficial
quick,
for
like,
growth.
I'm not too familiar with like what you mean by signed artists. So can you explain that real quick?
Yeah, so signed as in, like, signed under a record label. So, like, I forget, what is it, like Atlantic's one, or like The Weeknd's label XO, as opposed to being independent, where you just, you publish your own stuff and, like,
right,
you have basically full control and all of the rights over the content that you make. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I associate record labels with like very like old school, like 70s 80s music.
Yeah, that's kind of true. I mean, I think that there's still, I mean, obviously, I feel between the two of us, you definitely listen to more like 70s, 80s music than I do, so I feel like you know more about how things worked in the era. But, yeah, music labels are definitely still prominent today, I guess, but I think more so we look at, like, the face of,
Right.
The group or, like, the person.
Right. Yeah, so I guess we'll start with signed artists, as you said. Like, what are the sort of pros and cons?
Yeah, so I think obviously the biggest one is the ability for, I guess, mostly advertising and marketing. So it's very easy to, have the funds to put your music out there, purchase a billboard or, whatever it may be. Social media is a big way of advertising, piece of music content now.
The kind of stuff you see when you walk down Times Square.
Yeah, for sure. And then, you want to talk about networking, building a network.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I feel like, of course, like once you get to that level of fame in the music industry and you sign on to a label that can sort of connect you with like other artists signed under the label, and once you build that name for yourself, you're also like gonna start like collabing, and you're very like you get connected, you gain connections. Like, didn't like Pharrell produce like King Kunta for Kendrick?
I think so.
Like, yeah.
And like The Weeknd appeared in a Lil Uzi Vert music video once, just
Right.
because like these network or these record labels connect them. So
Right. So yeah, there's and we see it all the time. There's like all sorts of different collaborations between artists on, I mean, for everything.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's some sort of benefit.
Beyond that, uh, I feel like I want to say it's. I can't think of too many benefits off the top of my head. I think as of late, we haven't heard the best things about the music industry
Right.
in recent, I guess, in like the last 10 or so years.
And like, I do want to stress that like we're not in the music industry. We're
Yeah,
nowhere
no.
near experts. We're kind of just like talking about you know what we've heard.
Yeah, pulling
over
a
the
conversation
years.
topic out of our pocket.
That's facts. So that's the thing, because we don't really have that much, you know, experience with it. I'm sure there's like a lot of other like effects or benefits to being signed
for
onto
sure.
a label that we just literally wouldn't know about because we don't have any experience in the industry. But as you were saying, we haven't really heard the greatest things about the industry.
Yeah, and that's not even just here in America. I feel like that's even a worldwide thing. So, I guess the cons is like, as we were saying before, you don't own like 100% of the rights to your music when you're under a record label. So, I guess what you can do with it and how you, I guess, choose to put it out there is not 100% under your control. And I feel like for a lot of people that could be a very make or break kind of side effects of being signed under a record label. And I think that's the biggest one. And also just beyond that, I know, well, at least from what I've heard, like you were saying, you know, we don't have 100% expertise on this, but like in Korea with these K-pop groups, a lot of time, not only is their music largely under the influence of these record labels, but just their personal lives.
Right.
Like I have a friend who was telling me stories of like anytime. Well, this is more an issue with, I guess, celebrity culture at large, but
Parasocial relationships.
yeah. But like there was these damn, why am I blanking on the word? Like basically like news, like paparazzi groups, right?
Yeah.
And they would spend like the year trying to figure out like who the latest like couples were like in the K-pop, like between like K-pop groups. And then like if they found out, they would go to their record labels, like the artists, and like threaten like to like release this stuff. Like,
oh man.
And like it's a big deal because I think, you know, a lot of people kind of changes the way they perceive the artist. I know, like you were saying with a reference to parasocial relationships, like
Right.
a lot of these people who are really invested in these artists like might just like completely like just start hating them because like they're in a relationship with somebody or with somebody else. So like so then these record labels are like, hey, you know, like kind of end it or I don't know, just do something about it, right? And so like now they have control sort of beyond just their content, their music, and you know what they put out there as content, right? So other examples of that, Taylor Swift and Britney Spears, which, you know, I don't know. Do you want to talk more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was never too like super informed on like either of those situations, but from what I've heard, basically what happened is Taylor Swift used to be signed under this dude named Scooter Braun, and like basically Scooter owned Taylor's masters, which were like, you know, the masters are like the from what I gather, like the OG cut of her music, and she was signed under this guy for like pretty much all her albums until like recently, and this dude owned her masters, and I forget exactly what the deal is, but like he's profiting off of her music or something, which is kind of crazy. And you know, like there was beef between them, and you know, they're like Scooter got like Selena Gomez and Justin Bieber to dunk on Taylor or something. I don't know the full detail, but what happened, and I think this is sort of a good transition into sort of like the benefit of being an independent artist. What happened after that is Taylor basically threatened, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna re-record all my original tracks. Like I'm just gonna re-record the masters, and that's why you're seeing a lot of like the re-releases of like Taylor's version of the album. That's what she's doing, and it's apparently funny because Scooter was like when he sold these masters to another like private equity firm or something. He was like, nah, she's bluffing. She would never do it. Like, you could still make bank off of this. Um, but like obviously she wasn't bluffing, and so now I believe like the private equity firms are like suing Scooter for like a lot of money.
Damn.
Which is like,
Yeah.
this is karmic retribution, the good stuff.
Karmic retribution. I like that phrase. Yeah, and real quick before we get into independent artists and pros and cons. I mean, Britney Spears.
Yeah, Britney Spears
is, I feel like,
tragedy, man.
one of the most iconic stories of
Yeah.
the music industry and their influence and control over people's lives. I mean, along with Taylor, I don't know too many details about Britney's story, but
yeah,
I mean, can get the gist.
Yeah, her dad had like ownership of her life. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Getting into the music industry from like a young age, I think is it's hard. It's difficult because obviously, we have people who, know what their passions are from a really young age. They know what they want to do, right? And like I think that's a really great thing. But at the same time, I think it is dangerous it can be a bit dangerous to, I guess
kids don't know how to deal with that level of like fame and
no, not beyond that, just like the legality of it, like the idea of like a 13-year-old signing under basically signing themselves away to like this larger label, right? Like,
right.
And funny enough, it's probably gonna be, one of their parents or guardians who has to sign that contract, right? And so, although I personally would like support young artists and their pursuit of their passions and endeavors, I do think it's a little like it's risky to just enter an industry from such a young age like that, to be signing away part of the rights to your music and putting your face out there like that. So I feel like it's a little bit of a it's a dangerous thing. It's everything. A lot of things in life are a two-sided coin. Obviously, on one side there are the pros, and on the other there are the cons.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I know Britney. We've had documentaries about her stories told, and I feel like for a long time she couldn't really do anything. I think she recently got out of her situation.
I think so,
from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's
yeah,
awesome to hear.
Let's hear it for Britney.
Yeah. But yeah, so then on the flip side, we have independent artists. So
right.
I guess we can talk about some of the pros and cons of that. I feel like pros, obviously, full control over your music, whatever, like
full ownership.
Yeah, whatever you want to do, that's all you. You get to choose whatever platforms you want to put it on.
Cons though, obviously, like you're just lacking the resources of being connected to a big studio.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's very much, you kind of got kind of have to put yourself on the come up.
Mm-hmm.
And
what do you mean?
Like you were saying, so like earlier how we talked about like networking, like you like if you want to like meet a bigger artist or like have a feature on somebody's song or have somebody feature on your song, like you really have to like run through everybody's management and like speak to this manager, go here, go there, figure this out, figure that out, pay X amount of money, right? Whereas like, I mean, obviously I don't know exactly the entirety of how it works in big labels, but I feel like it's just easier to get connected, right? Like, oh, your manager already knows this other artist manager, or
Right.
potentially you might. I mean, obviously this is just speculation of mine, but hey, maybe you might even get like, kind of. It sounds kind of stupid, but like a discount on like a feature, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like instead of
Right.
having to pay like a really big amount because like you are an independent artist trying to reach out to this other artist. I feel like there are kind of ways where you could just organize it so that like you pay this amount of money and then like they can just take a percentage of the royalties off the song and just like you know, if you're within the same label. But I mean, this is just my speculation.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the cons, yeah, you don't have as big a network and the resources to you know really get your music going. And I think we can kind of speak on this a little because like obviously, you know, we do this podcast, right? And so, you know, we're under BSR and we've had a great time working with them, and so we're super excited to, you know, be in the BSR studio once
Right.
you know,
The
once,
renovations
yeah,
are-
once the
yeah.
renovation is done. But like I guess like imagine if like this was just something we decided to do, the two of us.
Right.
I feel like it'd be harder, like to sort of
Like, yeah, to have that initial platform.
yeah, and also just like, you know, the the people back at BSR have been doing this for a while, have been given us guidance and given us advice, and it's been really helpful and sort of, you know, establishing our podcast and
Yeah, our initial setup of like the mic and
Yeah.
like Ableton was pretty much just like based off of the guidance that they gave for like doing remote podcasts. Yeah, I mean,
yeah. So point being that like, you know, as an independent artist, I feel like these are some of the things you lack, right? Like you know, you, like we were saying, you don't exactly have like an initial pool of resources. You may not have people who have done it before to guide you. You maybe just be on your own. You have to figure out like.
but I feel like you have to get like I feel like artists you don't just be like you don't pick up a guitar and you're like, oh, I want to like make music, and then a record label comes your way.
No,
Like I feel like you only get picked up by a label once you start like gaining traction and getting big.
yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
So you
that is
have to
true.
start pretty much with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's not to take away the influence that labels have once you get big enough, and then they can hit you with like exponential growth.
Yeah.
But like I feel like you still have to start, like if you're trying to get big, you still have to start with like
No,
like
yeah,
didn't
for
Justin
sure. No,
Bieber
just
start with
YouTube,
like
YouTube,
yeah,
yeah.
YouTube.
So I was about to bring that up actually, yeah, when you were saying that. So yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously, I think from zero, straight up from zero, everybody needs to, I guess, sort of, let's say, reach like a certain level of growth, right?
Right.
And then once you hit that certain level, it's basically up to you as to whether you want to sign under a record label or just stay on your own. But like you were saying, I feel like if you sign under a record label, you definitely have a bit of access to that exponential growth that you were talking about.
Right. Yeah, and like going along with that, I feel like record labels have just a lot of control over, but they also get you connections you wouldn't like. I feel like, have you watched A Star Is Born?
No, I haven't. I do know. I did learn a song on guitar from that movie, and I still have never seen it.
Well, there's this one point in the movie where like Lady Gaga, I think, once she starts getting big and famous, like she starts getting spots on like SNL and whatnot, and it's like you wouldn't. I feel like that wouldn't happen if you didn't have that like certain fame and
Yeah, I get what
connection
you're
or
saying.
an agent running like behind the scenes trying to get you spots on this and that. So
Yeah. I feel like I mean
yeah.
it's like you'd have, would presume you'd have to find your own manager like as an independent artist, whereas like a record label could just provide you with one, right?
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like throughout the course of this conversation, I've sort of realized like how little I actually know about like what happens behind the scenes.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think it's very easy to just, as a consumer, just put your just think about yourself basically, and just like how the product benefits you, or like, or how it makes you feel, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, like,
Capitalism, bro.
yeah, but no, like, and like, yeah, like now being, because I, before this podcast, I never really done content creation.
Mm-hmm.
And so like now, like, being in a position where I produce content, it's not as easy. Like, you know, it's not like,
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of a grind.
yeah, it's definitely a little bit grind, and like I'm not gonna lie, the grind's super satisfying, and I'm super impassioned about, you know, this podcast and what we do, but like it does provide me with a new perspective as to, like, you know, how YouTubers or people making music, you know, other people making podcasts, you know, like the work that they put in. And so like I feel like, you know, what you were saying, like how we don't really know all of the stuff that goes behind the music industry. Like, I think now, I at least, you know, as I was saying, now I'm in a bit more of a position to be able to like envision what goes what goes on behind the scenes. So
Yeah, like all we know is like basically through our experiences here and from what we've seen in movies, TV, and in media.
Yeah, and just like news stories and stuff that you hear. Like if something really big happens off it, like we were saying earlier with Britney Spears, like, yeah, we know about it, right? But like,
or like with Kanye recording Donda in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Yeah. So yeah, that's something we wanted to talk about, right? So I guess transitioning into that, or like, well, I mean, this is kind of based on what we've been talking about. Kanye, I think he was signed before. I don't know if he's signed now, based on what he's doing right now. But yeah, so I guess one of the biggest things is Kanye's Donda 2 is allegedly dropping this Tuesday on.
No way.
Allegedly.
Actually?
Okay, yeah, it's supposed to be on the 22nd of February 2022.
Oh, that's crazy.
Here's the thing about Kanye. Kanye's kind of known for never releasing when he says he's going to release. So although he says that it should be releasing this Tuesday, you can't really be 100% sure that it's going to release this Tuesday.
Right.
But, you know, going, I guess, sort of sticking in line with this, basically assuming that it will drop this Tuesday, Kanye has chosen to release his album Donda 2 exclusively on his device, on this device that he's made, which I'm not gonna lie, it's a really cool thing. Like,
are you serious?
I can talk about it in a second.
Right.
But basically on his device called the Stem Player, which is $200. So essentially, you are paying $200 to listen to Donda 2, an album. People are already unwilling to pay like however many dollars a month it is for like Apple Music and Spotify, and that's to have everything, or mostly everything that's out there, right, in terms of music. I don't. Well, actually, that's not true because Kanye sold like I think 30-something thousand units on this thing. Yeah,
really?
Yeah, like he posted the figures on his Instagram, which I can try to pull up right now.
Who's dog? Who's paying?
I mean, Kanye's big and people love him, so like, but essentially,
he's a very polarizing figure, though.
Yeah. So essentially, yeah, like $200 to listen to an album. So, yeah, total units shipped 33,117. Right.
Oh my god.
So I see. Oh, so it launched the 25th of August, 2021.
So it's been a minute.
Yeah. So, and it says he's sold net sales since launch. You know, according to Kanye's statistics, $9,496,919. So almost 10 mil off of these devices, right?
Bro, can you pay for my tuition?
Yeah,
Please?
Tell me about it. But yeah, so
you already got stacks. You don't need any more of that bread.
I know, but yeah, he says he's made $2,227,012 in the 24 hours since he posted this post, I think, or I guess after, or if that makes sense, like when he posted it, the 24 hours before he posted it, I guess that's the number. So because that's when I presume he announced it'll only be on the stem
Right,
on this
yeah.
like stem player. And so yeah, like I was always saying, a lot of people are unwilling to pay like however many dollars a month it is for like
Mhm.
Spotify and Apple Music, right, to have everything. So you know, I personally wouldn't pay $200 to listen to
Okay, but
Donda 2,
when
but I
you
mean,
first
obviously
yeah,
people
when you
have.
first told me about this, I thought it was another streaming platform, but you said
No,
it's
so
like an actual
it's a
device.
device, yeah. So I think it's really cool because like I don't know I don't know too much about it but from what I've seen, you can like it looks like a speaker basically, like you can play music out of it, right? But then like it has like these 4 buttons, I think, and you press it and you can like isolate parts of a song.
Oh, that's
So it's
cool.
kind of cool. Yeah, like you can like isolate the vocals or like the bass or like the melody. It's
Interesting.
So let me.
That actually that sort of raises an interesting point of something else I wanted to talk about. Um and it's something I have a little more experience with. It's sort of like, the newfound democratization of being able to create music.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just considering, like, on a really grand scale, like, obviously, like, back during like the Paleolithic age, you could just have like music, like it's inherently human to create music
Mm-hmm.
and to engage with and enjoy music.
Yeah.
But like obviously that scale is a little too large. But recently, like going on the Western tradition, um, the people who are creating music during like the Baroque and classical era were largely like what am I trying to say here? Like if you were a medieval peasant, you don't often hear, or not a medieval peasant, wrong time period, but you know what I mean. Like you don't often, you might go see a symphony orchestra once in your life,
Mm-hmm.
ever. Uh, like Beethoven out here is like, "Hey yo, bro, I'm about to drop this track one time only," and everyone's like, "Oh," okay. But and like people like Bach, like with I believe there's a story where Bach traveled like super far to like the neighboring town just to listen to someone play the organ.
Mm-hmm.
The people who play the organ, and it's kind of crazy because like the organ itself as an instrument, like especially in those days, you had a dude under there like pumping the air to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
Like you had to have a certain amount of wealth to even like not just play it and learn how to play it,
Mm-hmm.
but to like get it. Like it's connected with the church. So there's like that religious aspect as well. But like I remember watching this really interesting video by this YouTuber named Sideways, and it's like, why do we sort of associate like the organ with sort of like spooky like Halloween times? Like
Mm-hmm.
why do you always associate toccata and fugue in D minor? Like, da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And it's like it kind of goes back to this tradition of like, you know, like imagine you're just like a dude in that European village, and you hear just like the voice of God basically just like piping out of the church all day long. Like that would be an absolutely wild experience.
Mm-hmm.
And like going more and more with that, like people like started going to conservatories, which I feel like were probably the OG record labels. like I believe like Rachmaninoff and like Rimsky-Korsakov. Actually, that's pure speculation, but I want to say they, or maybe it was like, man, I don't remember. My classical music's rusty, but yeah, like these
Mine's
composers,
non-existent, so don't
fair
worry
enough.
about it.
These composers would like maybe they would run into each other and like meet new composers at like at these music conservatories, and they'd
Mm-hmm.
learn and train together, and they'd also have like these like salons and sort of communities where they would like share their music, and it was a cool culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then like going a little bit past that and further, obviously like the sort of like African American tradition of music really exploded onto the scene.
Yeah.
And of course you have like the sort of spiritual stuff like gospel, but in a much bigger sense, blues basically gave us everything that we like today.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Rock
for
music,
sure, for sure.
jazz, like big band, like all that stuff came from the African American tradition. And so like music has gradually been getting a little more and a little more democratized, to the point where in like the 80s, like this is where I feel like studios were a really big deal. Like they get you in, and back then you'd have to like things were on like physical pieces of tape, right?
Yeah.
So like you'd have like an 8-track or whatever, and you'd record your different tracks and like splice and cut different pieces of tape, and like it was crazy. It's it's really interesting to learn about this sort of stuff. And I remember hearing this one really interesting thing about Bohemian Rhapsody and how it was produced. Like Freddie Mercury popped off on the operatic section. We know this. Apparently he had like something like 100 tracks going, but because you were literally limited by the physical restraints of recording technology at the time, like the guy mixing the track had to like he had to basically splice all those tracks, then like turn them like way down, then do it again and turn them way down, and that's how you get like 100 something tracks on like an 8-track player. And yeah, I mean, and apparently it took them like 3 weeks or something, or 3 months or something, to record just the operatic section.
Damn.
So yeah, like once again, you could see how like studios are a very big part of music
Yeah, 'cause
creation.
imagine having to do that independently, like on your own. Like,
Probably like wouldn't have happened.
yeah,
And like going further, like off that whole like the studios have control over your music. Remember, like, I don't know if you've watched Bohemian Rhapsody, the
I
movie.
haven't.
It's a nice one. I like, obviously Queen fans enjoy that.
Uh-huh.
But there's this point in the movie where Queen's records, like, no one's gonna want to listen to Bohemian Rhapsody. Like, I'm in Love with My Car is gonna be like the big hit track. Like, no one wants to listen to like a rock opera that's like 7 minutes long. And then Freddie Mercury's like, nah, I think they do. And what he did was really cool. He had they had a connection with a friend in the radio, and that friend would like drop little snippets of the song to sort of like build up hype around it. And more people were like pushing for them to drop the track based off of that hype. And as we know now, it's like just
beyond iconic.
yeah, for sure. So that's how the scene was in the 80s. And like, but now, like, I feel like music creation is an entirely different ballgame, and that's because of like a couple of things. The main one, I think, is probably like the sort of advent of the digital audio workstation, or DAW.
Yeah.
Like, literally you could download it on your computer and just start cooking up beats. Start literally, I mean, we're recording this on Ableton right now. That's a DAW.
And over the winter break, I made
Yeah.
a couple of pieces on Ableton too, and I bought a MIDI keyboard over the break, and like I don't have any prior music experience, or like, you know, like prior music production experience. So like for me, it was like something completely new, and like, yeah, like you were saying, like anybody can really do it.
And also, like, there are sort of ways to get around a label, I think, that are more democratic. Like, obviously, you could just kind of create a YouTube account, create a website, create, you know, a Spotify account, and start posting content there. And there's also, I believe, there's this sort of service called DistroKid. I don't know whether they technically count as a label or not, but I remember when I was in a band in high school, and we made our music, we like produced it on a DAW, as like, you know, we recorded it in my buddy's basement, and we're like trying to get the album out there, and we're like, as we can pay this platform just like, you know, like it was money, but it wasn't like anything crazy, you know. It wasn't like $1,000 or whatever. And we split it between like the 5 people in the band, so it didn't end up being that much. But like, as long as we just like paid DistroKid like a little bit of money, they could put our album on like so many streaming platforms. Like I didn't even know half of them existed. Like like Napster, Deezer. Like I did not know that these were streaming platforms that existed. But also they put it on like Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music. Like it was crazy. And the album's just there. It's still there. You just pay DistroKid a little bit of money and they just put it on there permanently. So like the sort of ability to get your music out there,
it's a lot easier these days.
And you could also, and then at that point you just put it on social media and you're like, hey, like go give it a listen, go give it some love, like, and that's how people get big these days, I think.
Yeah, so when it comes to artists and putting their music on streaming platforms, I think one of the other issues is how much do these music platforms take from, streams that the artist makes, and like how much does the artist actually get left with at the end. So I think that's another big issue with actually I feel like that applies to both signed artists and independent artists. I know that's sort of one of Kanye's big things right now, which is like why he's only releasing his album on the stem player, because from what I loosely understand, he like basically has an issue with how much like these companies are actually taking from
Right.
And so he's releasing it exclusively on this platform, the stem player, which, as I said, is $200 basically to listen to the album. As I said earlier, I personally think, beyond, like, as a device itself, I personally think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and like before you go on any further with that point, like, I think it's really cool that this device, as from what I gather from what you told me, is able to isolate certain tracks. Like, that's something I had to train my ear to do over the years, and I feel like by just enabling, the average listener to isolate certain tracks, you're sort of training them to listen more like a musician and a producer, which is once again going back to that whole like democratization.
Yeah,
music
so I did want to get into that. That's exactly where I was going. So really quick, so just so you have like an idea of what like this stem player can do, I just wanted to talk about some of the features. So this is just something I wanted to cover. You and I are now personally endorsing that anybody go out and buy this stem player.
We are making zero bread. Kanye is not giving us money, though we would like him.
Yeah, it would be nice. But yeah, so, if you guys want to look into it of your own accord, on your own time, and, I guess, make a decision if you want to purchase this or not on your own, then, go for it. But, we're not endorsing that anybody go buy the stem player. But, as I was saying, I personally think it's something cool. So I mean, even though I don't plan on buying it, but yeah. So some of the features. So it controls vocals, drums, bass, and samples. You can isolate different parts, add effects. It has 4-channel lossless audio mixing, real-time loop and speed control, tactile effects, save playback and download mixes, and update content and software.
So that's not even like a speaker at that point. That's like straight up a piece of production equipment.
And I feel like it speaks a lot to Kanye's, because I have, this is one of my, I feel like I don't think I'm too controversial in this take, and I've said it multiple times, but I think Kanye is the best beat producer in like that we've had in like the last 2 decades. I think his beats are really unique, and I don't know how true this is, but he said in an interview I saw of him that he has synesthesia, which would make a lot of sense, because he explained that like when he makes music, he sees a picture, like he paints a picture, and like I feel like I've never thought about it. It's kind of crazy, because like imagine being able to like see what you're making, which that is an entirely different topic of conversation, because okay, because let's say, right, because not everybody's taste in like art is the same, right? So like let's say he's painting a picture, it may look good to him but not to somebody else, but like whatever, at the end of the day, art's art, and right, it's not everybody's gonna like it, and that's whatever, right. But basically the other thing I wanted to say was like, it's kind of crazy how like how I guess auditory inputs can translate into visual ones. Like I've never, like, I mean, I don't personally have synesthesia. I feel like it'd be kind of cool if I did, but I don't know exactly how these things translate and how he sees the worlds, but basically, as you briefly touched upon, what I was gonna talk about is like, when it comes to artists and choosing how they release their music, right? So in Kanye's case on the stem player, I think it is very exemplary of the democratization of music, as you were saying, because like now he may want his album to be heard in a certain way. And
he's
think
creating new avenues with which to listen.
And I think that this stem player does that for him. Like it's what he wants to, beyond all of the things that he's been mentioning with these streaming platforms and taking a cut of the revenue. I think that his ability to make his own, I mean, I don't want to call it a streaming platform because it's not exactly a streaming platform, but make his own platform on which to put this music on and have people listen to it that way. I think it really gives this album would give this album a unique, a really never before seen unique perspective.
It's a unique way to engage with music.
Yeah, because like you're saying, I feel like there are parts of the song that you may like want to isolate, and you can hear things in a new light. So yeah, as you were saying with democratization of music, like I think there's another big sort of aspect of it. Like not only
it's an innovation.
Yeah, not only choosing whether you want to be a dependent or independent or a signed or independent artist, but also just like where you want to release your music, how you want it to be heard. Like one of the things that I find like always gets me on songs every time. It's like, damn, what do you call it? Panning? When like when like if I'm listening to a song and it starts transferring headphones, I lose it low key.
Panning's a fun effect. Like there are a bunch of songs I can think of like right off the gate that make great use of this effect, like any of Queen's music. And in the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, you see they did like a really like unique, innovative way where they'd like swing speakers around and mics and whatever. Another one is, have you watched Creed 2?
No.
Shame. Basically, the guy who does the music or did the score for Creed 2, Ludwig Göransson.
Okay, I know.
Ludwig Göransson, cracked musician. Love like the music scores he does, but there's this one like training montage sequence where Michael B. Jordan's like going ham, and the track is called Running, and there's this one part where like A$AP Rocky starts rapping, and when he says running, I remember sitting there in the theater, and you hear like running from the right ear, then immediately to the left ear, and then immediately to the right ear, and you're like, I was like freaking out. I'm like, yo.
And like when we're talking about the democratization of music, like I feel like this isn't like artists add these effects and these things that like you wouldn't hear, like, because like you remember how you referenced earlier in the episode, like you always see me walking down there with like an AirPod in. It's like, yeah, obviously, because like if somebody speaks to me on the street or somebody calls me, I'll be able to hear them. If a car, like, God forbid, I'm walking in a crosswalk and like a car's coming in and honks at me and I don't hear it because I have both AirPods in, right? Like, basically I wear an AirPod in, so people can call me or whatever to be safe, right? But like, whatever song I'm listening to, let's say they do use panning effects, I would never like know that it's in there unless I'm listening with both headphones in. And so like when we're talking about like how artists want people to listen to their music and perceive their music, like these are like, I mean, they could personally like, I guess, ask for these things. Like for example, like Adele, from what I understand, like this either at the beginning of this year or end of last year. I think it was end of last year. Her album came out end of last year.
Yeah,
or like later end of last year. I'm pretty sure she asked Spotify to take off the like shuffle thing on artist albums because she wanted her album to be listened to sequentially. And like another example of that is like Dawn FM that The Weeknd just released.
Oh yeah,
that album needs to be listened to.
Oh yeah,
like song by song, because you just don't get the same effect, right? So like 100%. These are all things that like artists want their content to be heard in a
like
specific way.
ordering like your song on an album we don't think about it. It is a very big way
for sure.
Artists can sort of influence. Like, I could get into a big rabbit hole with this, but like,
me too.
Like, yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
The example that comes to my mind is Africa by Toto.
Mm-hmm.
That track was on the B side of Toto 4 when they released it, of the album Toto 4. And like, I feel like a lot of people don't know what a B side is anymore. But like, basically, if you put a track at like the bottom of the B side, chances are people are not going to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's like a whole story behind it, how like David Paik was like, let's make the song, and Steve Lukather's like, no, we're not gonna make the song. But the band itself was like, this song isn't gonna get big. They were wrong.
Yeah.
That song's a banger. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I mean? Like, once again, it's the artist affecting the way people can perceive their music through something like a record label or an album.
Yeah, I was watching J. Cole's interview with Nardwuar, and he was talking about, like, there was a segment of the interview where he talks about like ordering tracks and how artists spend hours like trying to figure out like what a good order for their tracks are.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like, you know, for some artists it may be easier than others because like it depends on what type of album you're trying to make. Like, if you're just trying to make like I guess
an EP or LP.
Yeah, like I feel like that's a little harder as opposed to like if you're trying to make a story. So like I feel like the Weeknd's Dawn FM is like not. I feel like it personally, I think it's not as hard to order because I think he had a vision for like what he wanted beforehand. So like it's not like he sat there like, okay, I have this song, these many songs. What order I want to put
Pink
them in?
Floyd's The Wall, brilliant concept album set to a movie actually.
Yeah.
And I love that album because the tracks lead directly kind of one into each other, like just flow. And it tells a story. So, and I remember when I was with my band when we were trying to figure out like. We only had like 7 tracks and we were trying to figure it out. It still took us a hot minute to be like, okay, like, should we flip these two? Like, is this one more mellow than that? Like, do we start hard and end up mellow, or do we go the other way? Like, there's a lot of things to consider.
Yeah, and so like, I think like we were saying, these are all, as we were saying earlier about, you know, how we don't really think about all these things that go behind like content creation. These are all things that like the artists have to take into deep consideration, and then like when their album does get released, right, like they don't, like a lot of times, like let's say they just throw out an Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube Music, etc., they don't really have like a lot of say over how their music gets listened to, because if you really think about it, like they put it on these streaming platforms and then like people just listen to it, right? Like people will just, like we were saying earlier, press shuffle, and then like that whole ordering thing goes out the window because like whatever, you put it on shuffle and like you don't get the same experience. I mean, I personally, anytime I try to listen to an album, I always listen to it in order, like from the jump, right? And then after that,
after I know what songs I like, I can like
But then beyond that, like panning, right? Like I was saying, if you just don't happen to have 2 headphones in at the time when you listen to a song, you'll never like hear like these like amazing audio effects that they put into it, right? And
I remember seeing this Tumblr post. It's like one of my earbuds got busted, and it sucks because I listen to a lot of Queen, and when you're doing it, all you hear is Galileo, disappointing science.
Yeah. So, for me personally, like, you know, you could listen to a song a million times and have one AirPod in 999,999 of those times, and the 1 million time you put in the other AirPod and like. Then you like hear the song in a brand new light.
And that's also the way like music is, or that's like a technological like innovation in music, because there's mono where all channels come through one. There's stereo where it comes through like 2 different channels, and recently there's sort of like an innovation with like AirPod stuff, like the whole like spatial sound thing.
Yeah, spatial audio.
Yeah, spatial audio, and I think The Weeknd released a couple of tracks with spatial audio.
I think his entire last album.
Really?
The thing is like,
okay,
I don't know. I think, you know, like you're saying, like for example, like, because I know, Apple released like beyond the AirPods, they have these headphones, and I personally haven't used them. I have a friend who has them because they're pretty expensive.
Right.
But he told me like. He listened to a Weeknd song with them on for the first time, and they literally gave him chills.
Oh, yeah.
So like,
That's crazy.
I think. I mean, I don't. I think it depends on, you know. Like, for example, like an iPhone 4 is not gonna have 5G technology now, right? So like I think you need to have like specific headphones. But I mean, maybe like in the future, as audio technology develops, it'll become more widespread. So
yeah, and like this is gonna be a complete swerve from what we're talking about. But in the last bit, I kind of wanted to get into like way back to the point of like record labels, like what we started this conversation with, and I'm just gonna like race and the record label. I think I mentioned earlier about how like blues, jazz, rock and roll, all of these things sort of came from the African American tradition, and that is like black culture has been contributing to music so much.
Yeah, for sure.
In the last 100 years.
I was gonna bring up a point. I don't know if you read the 1619 Project, or if you're
yeah, I'm familiar with it. I don't think I've read it.
Okay, so yeah, I read in my AP Lang class in junior year, and I remember my teacher had us like basically take articles out of the, like basically pick an article to talk about in class or whatever, and the article I chose was essentially how like African American styles of music have shaped like all of the music we listen to in the present day. So I don't know, I just wanted to reference that sort of. Like, this is not a, like, new, I guess.
And I talked about a YouTuber earlier, Sideways, who does a lot of interesting music videos that I watch. One video he did a while ago that really stuck with me, it was sort of like, I don't know if have you watched, I keep asking you these questions, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. It's a play by August Wilson that was adapted into a movie, like, 2020.
Yeah.
Chadwick Boseman, phenomenal acting. Viola Davis killed it. Like, but there's this whole like plot in that movie where Chadwick Boseman is trying to not produce. He has a song idea and he's giving it to the label and he's like, hey, like I have this great idea for a song. I think it's gonna be a banger. It's like a big swing, like hit. Like, let me. And the music producer's like, no, sorry, like we just can't do it. I'll take the music, but like we'll pay you a couple of cents for it. But you know, it's like, and then the last scene of the movie was like an all white big swing band singing Jelly Roll, which is the song Chadwick Boseman's character wrote in the movie. I remember that scene gave me chills because it's like very like ominous, like sort of, and that sort of, you know, the industry like profiting off of black and other minority artists has been a persistent problem. And in the Sideways video about this, he talked about that era. Like, you know, you sort of picture that, you know, roaring 20s, big swing, big band era as like super distant past. So when you see a guy like Glenn Miller like getting really big off of swing music, a music style that is innovated and pioneered by black musicians, you think, well, that wouldn't happen now. But then like Elvis, like like Elvis, just a kid in Nashville, like really. And here's the thing: these artists, like white artists, aren't purposefully trying, or I mean, generalization, but aren't purposefully trying to being like, haha, like I'm gonna profit off like a minority's effort. Like that's these are people who are passionate about the music styles that they grew up listening to and the popular music around them. But the studio themselves are like really messed up. I remember there's like apparently like Elvis's manager was like a straight up menace. And Tutti Frutti, one of, or I think that's the name of the song. One of Elvis's, you know, big songs was like a Little Richard song. It wasn't his originally, but he's the one who like sort of got it really big. And it persisted until like, you know, the boy band era. It persisted at least like some like rappers, like rap is like objectively pioneered and like by black creators, and at least sometimes like rappers like Eminem sort of call it out, and I want to say the Eminem song "Without Me," he sort of like calls out like, profiting off of black music so selfishly and use it to get myself wealthy. And he's sort of like calling out not the industry and himself in that way, and in like a little bit of a satirical way, but you get the point. Like
Yeah.
the music industry is like very much not just profiting off of individuals, but it's been persistently affected by issues of sort of like institutionalized racism.
Yeah, for sure, bro. Yeah. Yeah, no, I
We got heavy there. Bro.
yeah, I'm not gonna lie.
Got kind of deep.
Yeah. No, but for sure. And I don't believe that anyone's sound should be exclusive to anyone, group,
Yeah.
race,
Yeah, of
culture,
course.
ethnicity, etc., etc. I think, it's healthy to recognize where these things come from. Like Nick, you were saying, a lot of, like for example, like gospel music or blues, soul. A lot of these are, songs that slaves would sing, either, in the fields. I'm gonna be straight up, or like away from the eyes of their slave owners. Right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
these are the things that like like hymns of freedom that they would sing. I guess essentially hoping for a better tomorrow. I know like one of them, like Follow the Drinking Gourd, was one I learned in elementary.
Elementary school, man.
And so, as you were saying, as we talked about, just right now, that I don't think it's healthy to, take sounds exclusively for
Yeah, of course.
any one group. However, I think it's very necessary to pay homage to where these sounds come from, the evolution of them over time, how they've affected our society today,
and recognize the fact that recognize the source, pay like the creator what they're due, and the music industry has been historically very bad with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and I mean, I think this goes as a no-brainer, but I think people should be, and I mean, this my opinion, but like I think people should be educated more on like music history, and kind of where it came from, like, because I love music, this, and I spend so much time like learning about like what makes music tick, like why do I like the music that I listen to, like where did it come from, like historically, and it's unfair, frankly, to discredit the effort of musicians. And this is not just like exclusive to the music industry. Like another big passion of mine, like science and chemistry, like
yeah, for sure.
Women scientists, people of color scientists, often swept under the rug by history.
Yeah. Damn, I was gonna say something, right? It slipped my mind.
Yeah.
Damn. Guess it's gone. But
Right.
And then the other thing, I guess, and just I guess really quick, in terms of while we're on the topic of stealing music, piracy. So like, I guess the biggest example currently, we've talked about it multiple times over this episode, Kanye and him releasing his album Scusi on the stem player. I don't think the majority of people are going to pay $200 to listen to this album. And when you're such a big artist and you decide to release music so exclusively, it's gonna get pirated. I know, like I strongly doubt that this album won't get pirated. And so I guess we'll have to see what happens.
But I feel like there's certain platform, like Spotify basically pays artists little to nothing for streams, but there's platforms like Bandcamp or something that profits go exclusively to artists, and it sort of helps independent and up and coming artists get big, get some resources, and democratization of music. TLDR, we love music. Music industry has its pros and its cons, just like everything. And I think that's about our time.
Yeah, that's all the time we have for today. But
yeah, once again, bro, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's been a pleasure talking with you too.
And you guys have been listening to 101.1 FM, WBRULP, WFOOLP, WVVXLP Providence.
If you guys want to check us out on the Outta Pocket Podcast website, that's www.theoutapocketpodcast.com. That's OUTTA for Outta. And we also released on Spotify and Apple Podcasts this week, so you can access those links through the homepage of our site if you want to check us out.
So true, bestie. Also on our site, we have a contact page. So if you want to shoot us an email, let us know what you think of the show. Things you like, things that you want to see more of.
Yeah, topic suggestions. If there's anything you want us to talk about, or just reviews and recommendations that you have for how we should improve, we would gladly accept those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in to the Outta Pocket Podcast. We'll see you next week. And fellas, it's time, bro. It's time to enter the Menace arcs. Buy the Black Air Forces. Get the cloak on. Roll around listening to like Attack on Titan theme songs. It's time.
Yeah. Hey, catch you guys later and take care.